July 25th?
Yes, it is.
July 25th, 2017. We're at the San Diego Air and Space Museum. And today I'm speaking with, your name, sir?
John Caston, C-A-S-T-O-N.
And your relationship with Hawley Bowlus.
Yes.
Who was he?
Who was he?
Yeah.
Well, he was a resident of San Fernando, California. And I think he was a pioneer glider pilot. He learned to fly in World War I by taxiing the old airplanes from one end of the airport to the other in France.
Wow. So then when he got back to the United States, and we're talking about early 1920s, I suppose?
It's something like that, yeah.
Okay, when did you first meet him?
Well, I lived down the street from them
Where was that?
in San Fernando.
Okay. Now, he became famous for building gliders,
Yes,
or should I say sailplanes,
yes.
which,
He also was the inventor of the Airstream trailers
right.
in that time. Remember that trailer with the all metal?
I had one. I owned one, I know what you're talking about.
Oh, that was his invention too. I mean, his origination.
When did you meet him?
Well, he had a couple sons, and they lived up the street from us. So I just associated with the sons, and I got to working a little bit around there, mixing glue and sweeping floors.
Okay, so let's go back again. So you were friends with Hawley Bowlus' sons.
Yes,
Okay, so that meant he was older than you.
a year, 1 year, and one was a year or two younger.
No, I mean, Hawley himself, how much older was he?
Hawley?
Yeah, Hawley, yeah. How much older was he than you?
Oh gosh, he was already well known,
Okay.
and I probably remember at one time, but I don't at the moment.
Okay, what year were you born?
1923.
Okay, so when he was building his gliders, his first glider was called the Paperwing? Was that his first glider?
No, he built a glider, and trying to think. He built a glider. He built a glider, and he took it up on a little ridge
Right.
in Pacoima or San Fernando. They were
Right,
two
yeah.
together, and he had the family horse, and the family horse saw him. He's a couple hundred feet or so behind, and took off. In his first flight, that was his first flight with a glider, and he hit the ground, and he was laying out there kind of half dazed and thinking, well, I wonder if I'm going to survive this accident. But of course, he wasn't really injured. In those days when you had an accident, anything could happen. But that was that.
Okay, so now you met his sons, and he was building gliders at that time.
Yes, and that was I think that was maybe in '37. He sent a glider to Elmira, New York. You know Elmira?
I know the name, yeah.
And that was where the Glider Association first started kind of having meets and stuff like that. And we had a glider meet in Arvin, California, about a year or two later, in 38, 39.
So, okay, now let's see. Now you would have been 20, so by 38 you were 15 years old.
I was about that.
Okay, so you were basically just sort of the helper guy to help make the airplanes, I guess.
Yeah, I did the towing.
Okay, but you were talking about gluing them together. Where was that done?
Gluing them. He sent a glider to Elmira.
No. Where was this? Did he have a shop or a building where he was building gliders?
I was sweeping the floors most of the time.
Yeah, but where was it?
San Fernando.
So he had a building where he was building
He
gliders?
did. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
So then they sent a glider to Elmira for a competition.
Yes.
Do you remember who flew it?
What? Who was?
Who was the pilot?
Trying to think who was the pilot. Was it Dick Dupont? It could have been one of the Dupont, because he was in partnership. I think Dick Dupont financed him on some of that stuff.
Okay. Dupont as in Dupont tape and paint and all that other stuff, right?
Are you familiar with Duponts?
That's the Dupont family. They're very wealthy, right?
They were the very rich people at that time. They were in I think, made a lot of money during World War I in the ammunition,
right.
explosive thing.
So now you were working at the factory, sweeping floors and doing whatever.
Yeah.
Getting paid?
Yeah, I got about 10 cents an hour.
Oh, highly paid at that time, I guess.
Yeah.
So now somewhere about 1938, he developed a new glider called the Baby Albatross.
Yes.
Like we have down on the floor.
It was a year before that he did it. 38 is when I came in.
Okay.
And it was the glider, I think, went in 37, might have gone to Elmira.
What did you do at the factory? Did you help build the Baby Albatross?
I helped them, there was building that stuff. I had nothing to do with the design. I was using things like, I'm trying to think about it, little staplers, and we would glue and staple stuff on, and then we would sand it off, and then they would put some varnish on it, clear varnish and that kind of stuff. And I was involved with that kind of stuff.
So the fuselage is some sort of molded plywood.
It was later, but the one at first wasn't.
Okay. Well, when they molded the plywood, how did they do it?
Well, they built, let me think for a second. The Winnie Mae was Wiley Post.
Right.
Remember that name?
Yes.
They built a concrete form, and then they built the matching one.
Okay.
And they would put a layer of wood down, of thin, and you'd glue it. You'd put I think he put cheesecloth down to hold it, and then they would do it the other way, and then on the final one you would put it, in the flow, and they put a airbag on top, and they would put a kind of a thing to hold the airbag down, and they put some air in there and push that thing down. Made a molded fuselage.
So what they did is use thin pieces of wood.
Yes.
Almost like a laminate, real laminate, and then glued it and then pressed it together.
Yeah, and that was first done on, I think, Wiley Post's airplane.
Okay.
Yeah, you remember that name?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I think he might have done the first one.
Well, how about that? Yeah.
Because
so when you were putting the airplanes together, you already had the fuselage, and then the wings were spars, right?
Yes.
And now how do they mount? Because on the Baby Albatross, it has a big aluminum tube that goes back to the tail. What was inside the tube?
No, well, just the controls. I mean the wires.
Okay. And so you were involved in putting that together?
The FAA or the CAA or whatever they were called in those days.
CAA, yeah.
They were fighting with him that all the time about that, because he had some things where he had to make a 90-degree turn.
Right.
And, they were concerned about pulling the stuff together, pulling it out.
Right.
But he had a pendulum type elevator. It was like that. And they had a problem with that a little bit too.
Well, didn't they have problems with them being kind of jerky to fly because the elevator would stick?
Well, that was that was the argument that the CAA or FAA had with him. And I remember the guy's name, it was Brewster or something like that. And he was kind of, against Hawley and his elevator. And
well, didn't they put springs on it to hold it in position?
They did.
Yeah.
They did. They did a. I think they did an elastic, a stretchable rope. Yeah.
Right.
And that was supposed to, mitigate that somewhat.
Yeah. Well, I've read it. What I read, it's over here somewhere. They read that it would stick, and they needed to move the hinge point, but then they finally worked it out so it worked.
Yeah. Well, of course, it was a floor. In other words, the front part was smaller than the,
Right.
and it had a tendency when it's flying to stay stable.
Right. Did you ever fly one?
I flew in them.
Not the baby Albatross.
He built a two-place.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. And I flew in the two-place.
Now, where was that?
In Arvin, California.
Now, where is Arvin, California?
Near Bakersfield.
Okay.
It's between Bakersfield and Tehachapi. And
you got the good mountain air lifts.
There was a kind of a nice ridge there for going around,
right.
And on the top of it behind was a field. And once you get on this side, you get the prevailing wind,
right,
and you could do some slope flying.
Right.
And I was up there with in fact, there's pictures somewhere with a fellow by the name of Don Stevens. And Don was a Hollywood kind of show-off guy. He liked to be down in the area where the people were in Hollywood, and he was kind of that kind of guy. And so, but Don was a pretty good pilot. I flew with him, and there was a picture somewhere, and I gave it to the museum about that area, take a picture of what, and it has a picture of me and I think Don and Hawley and somebody else.
So now what year would that have been?
1938, 39.
Okay, so now let's kind of move forward a little bit. Hawley died in the 50s, didn't he? Early 50s?
Let me think. He had a heart attack, and he was putting he made a sailboat, and he was putting it in the water, I think, in San Pedro or somewhere, and he had a heart attack.
So he was a very creative guy.
A very what?
He was very creative, in other words. He was always inventing things.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was a kind of original thinker, and he worked for Howard Hughes.
He did?
Exactly. That's one thing you probably didn't know.
No, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did he do for Hughes?
He was the head of their. Howard Hughes made him the head guy of his kind of innovation stuff, and he worked for Howard Hughes, and I'm the guy who told him to go down and get the job.
What year was that?
Oh, I don't know, 38 or something like that. I don't remember. I was reading in the paper that Howard Hughes was hiring mold makers. You know what a mold maker, kind of,
Yeah,
you
sure.
work the other thing backward. You got to think backwards to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, right.
And I says, I read that Howard Hughes was hiring somebody for their mold making shop. So he went down and got the job, and he ended up running it. He was the guy who was.
So overall, do you have any idea how many Paperwing airplanes were built?
The what?
The Paperwing. How many did they build of that airplane?
I only know. I only heard of one.
Really? And then the baby Albatross was sold to another company in the 40s, 42, 43, somewhere in there.
I think that some other company took over
Yeah,
because they were making kits,
right.
and some other company take over. I used to make the ribs for those kits.
Oh, is that right? Where was that?
Right there in Pacoima, San Fernando.
Now there was a connection with San Diego with Bowlus. I mean, what is that? Did he live here in San Diego?
He did at that time because he was working for something called Ryan Mahoney. You know that name?
Well, that'd be Ryan Aircraft, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he was associated with them.
So he moved around a lot apparently as a designer.
Well, I don't really think he moved very much, but he told me some stories about the Lindbergh's airplane, that they had a problem.
Which airplane was that?
Spirti of St. Louis.
Okay. Was he involved in that airplane?
Was he in?
Was he involved in designing that airplane?
Yeah, he was the designer of that. They did it as they went along, and he said Corrigan. Remember that name?
Yeah.
Longway Corrigan.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of around there, but he didn't have anything to do with Bowlus. But he
So
was.
Bowlus worked for Ryan Aircraft in 1927 because they took basically a standard airplane and they changed it, added fuel to it, made the tail smaller. They did a lot of things to a standard airplane.
Yes, they did.
And we have the standard airplane downstairs, plus we have the model of the Spirti of St. Louis. So he works there. Then after he works there, then he does his own airplanes for a while. Apparently, didn't make a lot of money at it, I would guess.
As a glider.
Yeah, the glider. He probably was not a commercial success.
It was not.
Okay.
I built a lot of the ribs.
Okay. And so now 1940 rolls around. Where were you living in 1940?
I was there with them.
In Pacoima.
And when 1942, I graduated out of high school. And I went into the Navy and eventually became a Navy pilot.
Oh, you did? What'd you fly?
TBMs, a torpedo bomber, and I made 14 landings on a carrier.
When you got out of the Navy, it was like late 1945. So what'd you do then?
Well, I went to work. I went back to, I think, Hawley Bowlus, working at Hawley's.
Where was he then?
And I just built ribs. We were putting out a glider kit. Remember the baby Albatross?
Yeah.
And they put out the baby Albatross glider kit.
Right.
And it was $385
Yeah,
or
something like that. Cheap, yeah.
Well, I was making ribs.
Okay. So you went from being a Navy pilot, then back to work to what you were doing just before you went into the Navy.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, the Bowlus company, though, I thought it ceased to exist. I thought another company bought them.
Nelson, the name Ted Nelson strikes me as being somebody that came in, and they wanted to make a powered glider. Did you ever see that?
No.
Well, they put the engine in the back,
right,
underneath, and that was a Bowlus baby Albatross with a tricycle gear and a little Nelson engine. A guy by the name of Ted Nelson, I think it was, built those engines. And we had a problem with those engines. They overheated and they would freeze up.
That's not good.
And, well, that was, so they had to loosen up the engine quite a bit, you know, because it's air cooled.
Right.
So they made it sloppier, and they were able to get more hours out of the engines.
Right. So did you ever fly one of those?
I never did, but I flew in them. I mean, I rode in them once or twice.
But so you never actually flew a glider by yourself?
Never did.
No, isn't that funny? I mean, here you were a qualified Navy pilot. You think you could fly that, you could certainly fly a glider.
Yeah. Don Mitchell, remember that name?
Nope.
Well, he was a guy that was always he wanted to build a flying wing.
Right.
And so he had built one, and he had asked me. He knew that I was a pilot, qualified Navy pilot. I had commercial and everything else that went with it. So he contacted me, or I contacted him, I forget which, and he was out, I think at Hammett or somewhere. And he built this glider that he wanted me to fly. And he knew I could fly because I'd been a Navy pilot. And so I told him, sure, let me know, I'll come out and fly it. Well, Don had a heart attack.
So you didn't continue in an aviation career after the Navy? You didn't fly anymore?
I went to college.
Went to college. What you got a degree in something?
Yeah.
What?
I have a degree in agricultural things.
Oh, I see.
I went to Davis, you know Davis?
Yeah.
I went to Davis.
Oh, that's right. She said you had a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah.
You had all sorts of stuff in Valley Center.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I went to Davis and I went to Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
I took courses in those places.
Okay, so your last relationship with Bowlus was shortly after the war for some short period of time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Hawley Bowlus never had much money.
Right.
You know, he was the guy who just didn't have money. He said money was made to spend, and he was always kind of behind.
Yeah.
And and so he ended up working for Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
Well, I was the guy who told him
to go to work for Howard Hughes because of the mold design.
Because they were running some ads.
Yeah.
And I always read the ads, you know, because I was working for Radioplane. Remember Radioplane?
No. What was that?
They're still active.
What is it?
They're a company that built. When I was there, we built a little flying wing, and it was radio directed. They were using them for target practice in the artillery.
Really?
And it had a little Kekoffer. Remember that Kekoffer company that put out outboard motors?
Right.
Yeah, and it used a Kekoffer.
Yeah, the Kekoffer. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's from a long time ago.
Yeah. I'm having problems with that too.